Well, today at 5, we are live at Westminster. There's a lot of shouting and a lot of chanting going on this green today. This is the day that MPs were meant to be taking part in the big vote on the Prime Minister's Brexit plans. That vote, as we know, has been delayed, and the Prime Minister is instead spending the day, not here, but in European capitals, asking fellow leaders to give further assurances on the deal that she's negotiated. Those assurances are focused on the future of the Irish border. Many Conservative MPs want the deal to be totally renegotiated. So these are the day's developments so far. Theresa May currently in Brussels meeting the European Council President Donald Tusk. We're expecting to get an update on that shortly. He said yesterday that the deal could not be renegotiated. This morning in Berlin, Mrs May met the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who has said there is no way to change the Brexit deal. This followed a meeting with the Dutch Prime Minister, and there'll be a meeting with the Irish Taoiseach tomorrow. On the crucial question of when MPs will get that big vote, well, Downing Street says it'll take place by the 21st of January, which is the final deadline, by the way, for the deal to be approved. In the Commons today, Labour forced an emergency debate on the government's handling of the process, and Jeremy Corbyn is being urged by other opposition parties to engineer a vote of no confidence in the government. We'll have details and reaction as the shouting and chanting continues. We'll be talking to Gina Miller, the prominent anti-Brexit campaigner, and Lord Lamont, one of the leading Brexit supporters, will be with us too, the former Chancellor. We start with this report by our Europe correspondent, Damian Grammaticus.
It's something the EU may never have seen. A British Prime Minister in trouble at home, seeking help in her hour of need. First stop the Netherlands. Can she come back with anything that'll appease the seething discontent back home? At this late stage, a charm offensive may not be enough to secure real changes to the deal on offer. All the Dutch Prime Minister would say was that their breakfast had been useful. From there, it was on to her next stop. At every turn, the Prime Minister appears stuck. Political gridlock at home, and here in Berlin, even her car door refused to open. Her fundamental problem, though, she's agreed the deal must have a backstop to avoid border controls ever returning on the island of Ireland, but Parliament doesn't like it. So the UK's junior Brexit minister was in Brussels with her new demands.
Good morning. She wants additional legal reassurances that the UK cannot be permanently trapped in the Irish backstop. That's been the issue all along, and that's the issue that's at the heart of the concerns expressed by many members of Parliament.
But EU countries say Mrs May agreed a year ago to the idea of special terms for Northern Ireland. After months of haggling and drafting, the negotiations are over.
Wir haben nun so viel Kraft, Zeit, Energie.
We have put so much time and effort into something that we in Berlin and Brussels don't want. Nobody wants the UK to leave. Now there will be further talks, but I can't imagine where we can substantially change anything. We can't reopen what have been tough negotiations, hard for the EU 27 and the UK.
Instead, the EU says it can give reassurance, perhaps a document saying ideally, hopefully, the backstop will never be used.
There is no room whatsoever for renegotiation. But, of course, there is room, if used intelligently, is room enough to give further clarifications and further interpretations without opening the withdrawal agreement.
And this evening, Mrs May arrived in Brussels for meetings with Mr Juncker and first Donald Tusk, who'll chair a summit of EU leaders in 2 days' time. But as they've made clear, they'll try to help Mrs May in her predicament, but won't ride to her rescue. Damian Grammaticus, BBC News, Brussels.
Well, in a moment, we'll get the very latest from Westminster here with our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young. But first, let's go to Brussels and our Europe correspondent, Damian Grammaticus, who can bring us up to date, Damian, on the Prime Minister's visit and any signals at all that she might get more than just the odd extra assurance on this plan.
Well, she might get a little more than that, Hugh, but not much more. The signals are that what we've heard so far coming from Angela Merkel after that meeting in Berlin at lunchtime is that Mrs Merkel has been saying since then that there will be no renegotiation of the central withdrawal treaty with that crucial Irish backstop in it. but there could be offers of reassurance, letters on the side perhaps to try to indicate that the EU doesn't want to see the backstop come into effect, would try not to have it ever come to pass, but not on the central question. The EU and the UK, Mrs May agreed with the EU leaders more than a year ago, or a year ago exactly, that there would be, the Irish issue would be sorted out with a backstop arrangement, special arrangements for Northern Ireland. The negotiations since then have hammered that out in the way that the UK wanted, in the way that Mrs May demanded, the customs union arrangement, which the EU side were very reluctant to concede. So I think what they feel now is that they've conceded that, but they will not concede further on the basic principle that it has to be there and enduring. So the appearance is that from the talks that are happening right now with Donald Tusk and then with Jean-Claude Juncker, the same message will be delivered. No to fundamental changes, yes perhaps to reassurance.
Damien, thank you very much. Let's go straight to Westminster and talk to Vicky Young, my colleague there. And Vicky, tell us about this afternoon's debate first of all, and what happened there.
Yeah, of course, this was the moment, Hugh, when we thought we were going to be building up to one of the biggest moments in recent parliamentary history. But of course, that controversial decision by the Prime Minister to delay that meaningful vote means that there's a lot of protesters out here, but nothing much going on inside. Now, Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, did manage to secure this emergency debate to discuss that decision by the government. And what opposition parties are saying is that she's running scared, that she knew that her deal was so bad that she couldn't put it to the House of Commons because it would be defeated so heavily. This is what the Labour leader had to say this afternoon.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister comes back with nothing more than warm words, then she must immediately put her deal to the House. No more delays, no more tricks. Let Parliament take control.
So the Labour leader saying he wants things to move pretty quickly once the Prime Minister gets home. We know, though, that she is travelling to Dublin tomorrow to meet the Irish Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, because, of course, that issue of the Irish backstop so fundamental. Now, the government has said that the only deadline it's giving for the vote to happen is the 21st of January, and ministers in the House of Commons in Theresa May's absence were defending her decision to travel abroad.
I think anybody who has observed my right honourable friend the Prime Minister in action both in her current office and the other offices she has held over the years will be in no doubt about her commitment to parliamentary accountability, whatever the cost to her in terms of the time that you, sir, rightly should say that she should be spending, and she accepts she should spend, in asking questions from colleagues in every party, in every corner of this House.
But of course that question remains whether she can get anything substantial enough to persuade not just the DUP, of course, her partners in government, but those on her own side too.
Vicky, just one more point, just because there was some talk earlier today of the Conservative MPs putting in a sufficient number of letters expressing no confidence in the Prime Minister. What's your understanding of that?
I mean, as you know, Hugh, we've been here before with lots of rumours circulating about whether they've reached that crucial number of 48, that's 15% of Conservative MPs. That would be enough to trigger a vote of confidence in the Prime Minister, which she would then have to win if she were to stay on as leader of the Conservative Party. Now, there are lots of MPs saying that they feel that they are close to that number. Again, we've been here before, but it does feel different this time. There are other people saying that they have been willing to put that letter into Sir Graham Brady, who is the chairman of this 1922 backbench committee. Only he knows, of course. He did say previously that the Prime Minister should expect to be in the country if she were ever to be told that they'd reached that number. But everyone really still wondering what the truth is about all of that. But it does feel there's a lot of anger on the Conservative benches about what has been going on.
Vicky, we'll pause there. Thanks very much. Vicky Young there for us with the latest thoughts on what's happening inside Parliament on those Conservative benches. With me is the former Conservative Chancellor and indeed Brexit supporter, Lord Lamont. Good to have you with us, Lord Lamont. Thanks very much. Let's hope that we get some peace to just talk here. And I'm just wondering, first of all, What are the prospects, do you think, of the Prime Minister coming back from this trip today with something meaningful which would satisfy you and some of your colleagues?
Well, I think what she needs to come back with is a significant alteration and probably something that is legally binding. There was talk this morning of a protocol which wouldn't be in the withdrawal agreement but would be legally binding. But I think assurances by themselves will not be enough. It needs to be something firm. I think the key point about the Irish backstop is the inability to get out of it. And if the exit mechanism or the arbitration mechanism for getting out were altered, I think that would relieve a lot of anxiety about this whole agreement, because although there are many other things that people object to, they would then become temporary and they could be accepted because there would be an end to them eventually.
Well, you know how the system works and you've dealt with the EU yourself. What are the prospects of the Prime Minister, in your view, getting that scale of change?
Well, many EU negotiations go on and you're told this is the final deal, this is the ideal deal, there won't be any change. It wouldn't be the first time that that had proved to be empty rhetoric and the so-called final deal was the penultimate deal. We may see this run after Christmas. I mean, I don't think this is going to be over in just a few days.
Does that make you nervous when we approach the 21st of January?
Of course it makes me a bit nervous, and I worry about confidence in business, confidence on the markets, all these things, but there's no avoiding it, I'm afraid.
Prime Minister, in effect, pushes it towards the 21st of January, and it then becomes really a bit of a binary choice between the prospect of no deal or this deal, or possibly even, no longer binary, no Brexit at all. What would your view be then?
Well, I think it would be a binary choice. This deal, with all its perceived and argued defects, or no deal. Although I've never been putting forward no deal as my first option, I think it's been over-demonized. I think actually with proper preparation, and we've still got some time till the end of March, I think we could prepare for it, and I don't think it would be catastrophic as people have been saying. And actually you're allowed a transition period under WTO rules, so everything could remain the same for a while.
There are clearly colleagues of yours who think that a few months is nothing like long enough to prepare for the challenges that no deal would bring.
Well, I think the real difficulty is that the government has been saying it's this deal or implication chaos. They may have to turn round and find themselves saying, oh, well, we've prepared for this rather well and it won't be so bad, and I think that would be the reality.
What's your view, given your long experience on the Conservative benches in the Commons? What is your view on the balance of options there for your colleagues, some of whom clearly are now agitating even more than they were yesterday or the day before for some kind of challenge to the Prime Minister?
Well, the problem with a challenge to the Prime Minister is, one, it's going to take time, even with an accelerated timetable, when days matter. I'm not sure we can afford that luxury. Secondly, the Prime Minister might win a vote of confidence, and so where then?
Where then indeed, because do you take the view that in the circumstances we're in, we're heading towards a point where you would like to see a change of leader or not?
No, I was implying that I think there's a bit of a diversion.
Yeah, no, it's a diversion now.
Yes.
But at the end of this process, you think that a change of leadership would be ideal or not?
No, I'm not arguing for a change in leadership. I'm arguing for a change in policy.
When we see the way this has been handled, lots of the criticism has been about the way the government has handled the process. Has it been competent? Has it been organised? Has it had a sufficiently strategic sense? What is your view of that?
Well, I think there have been two things wrong with the negotiation. One, the Irish border's become the premise on which everything else is built. It shouldn't have dominated as much as it has. Secondly, I think the government have tried to have a Brexit that satisfies not just the 52, but the 48% as well. That can't be done.
And in trying to strike that balance, do you accept that the Prime Minister has come up with a kind of hybrid deal that is really trying to please all camps, and ultimately that is impossible?
Yes, I think the hybrid solution doesn't really work, and possibly the Prime Minister has thought this was all about immigration, whereas it's not all about immigration for Leavers, contrary to the propaganda that we often hear. So, we need a good economic solution, not just a solution that is politically convenient.
When the Prime Minister travels to Dublin tomorrow, what should she be asking the Taoiseach to do, and what do you think he might be prepared to do beyond something you've already mentioned, which is just offer a few assurances around the backstop?
Well, personally, I'm puzzled why we need a backstop. What is a backstop? A backstop is an insurance policy. Why are we insuring against something that government is prepared to give an absolute, legally binding, I'm sure, undertaking that there never will be a hard border? The Irish government themselves, the Taoiseach, has said there will never be a hard border, even if there's no deal. Well, if that is the case, why do we have to have this convoluted backstop, which seems to be another word for guarantee? I don't understand it.
It's because the EU says very clearly that given that this will be a frontier, that for them is non-negotiable.
You put your finger on it. It's the EU who might like a hard border. Nobody else wants a hard border.
Well, no, but they see it as part of what is necessary.
Well, they may have their reasons, but you put your finger on it. But of course, if we have a free trade agreement, that doesn't arise.
And so when we get this very strong phrase from Brussels now and again, which is no backstop, no agreement, no Brexit deal that Britain can kind of swallow, if you like. You think that's false?
Well, as I said, we've sometimes in the past seen the EU take categorical positions. You quoted what Jean-Claude Juncker said this morning, but he actually had another sentence after the one you quoted in which he said, well, we'll see what we can do to facilitate Britain passing
And
this.
How much room for manoeuvre do they have, do you think?
Well, I don't think they have a lot. I think this is a tall order.
And do you think that ultimately the Prime Minister will come back here, what, in a week or 2 or 3 weeks' time, I mean, beyond Christmas possibly, with a deal that your colleagues can support in the Commons?
Well, I would like to think that, but I think it is difficult.
Yeah, I mean, you don't think it's likely?
I'm not going beyond saying it's difficult.
No, but today you don't think it's likely?
I think it looks very difficult, but as I say, the EU often, I mean, the EU don't want to be in a position of no deal any more than a lot of people in this country. I think it's overdone, the anxiety about no deal, but undoubtedly there are a lot of people who are nervous about it. I think that's partly the government's fault because it hasn't been seen to prepare properly. I suspect it's done more preparation than we know, but certainly, you know, the government, if we were to move, let's call it WTO terms or call it a managed no deal or whatever you want, but the government would have to line up behind it if we're driven towards that.
Lord Lamont, good to talk to you. Thanks very much for coming. Sure. Thanks a lot. Lord Lamont there for us, the former Conservative Chancellor, giving us his view. A little later in the programme we'll be talking to Gina Miller, who is of course one of the prominent campaigners against the kind of Brexit arrangement, and indeed was part of that legal case that happened giving Parliament the right to vote on the start of the Brexit process. So we'll talk to her a little later on. Our thanks to Lord Lamont. As we've heard, the question of preventing a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic with the so-called backstop guarantee, that is probably the most controversial part of the Prime Minister's Brexit plan. The Democratic Unionist Party in Northern Ireland says the withdrawal agreement leaves Northern Ireland following different rules to the rest of the UK. But some parties in Northern Ireland take a very different view to that, must be said. Many businesses also saying that they are very keen to avoid any kind of new trade barriers. We've spoken to many of them in recent months and they're adamant about that. Our Ireland correspondent Chris Page has more details.
It's difficult to tell where it is, but it's easy to see how it's affected the Brexit process. The Irish border has been the most difficult issue for negotiators to resolve. The sticking point is the backstop, an arrangement to ensure there'll be no checks on the land frontier, even if trade talks aren't successful. So under the backstop, there'd be some checks on goods coming across the Irish Sea from Great Britain into Northern Ireland, because this part of the UK would continue to follow rules of the EU single market. A number of MPs argue that would mean the United Kingdom wouldn't be so united. That's one of the main reasons why this deal has run into so much political trouble. Whether they transport products by land, sea or air, businesses say they need the uncertainty to end. The boss of this haulage firm says the lack of clarity is crippling.
The politicians have displayed themselves in a very poor light. And at this moment in time, our confidence in them as decision makers is at an all-time low. Yeah, that we run a business, and if we run a business as they run Parliament, we build a business.
Most political parties here opposed Brexit, so did 56% of voters in the referendum. 4 parties who campaigned to remain have come together with the joint message of bank the backstop. They say the Prime Minister should protect it, no matter what happens now.
She's been sent off now in search of unicorn Brexit, which doesn't exist, and we all have to wait with the continuing uncertainty and instability.
So should the EU soften its position on the backstop, because some would say that would make a deal more reachable?
People are not recognising that the EU are there to negotiate for them, not for us. The UK government is there to put our case.
But Northern Ireland's biggest party has a different slogan: bin the backstop. The Democratic Unionists, whose 10 MPs keep Theresa May in power, say she has to radically change her strategy.
This is a Prime Minister who just seems to find a brick wall and beat her head against it. She did the same last week with the legal opinion. She, up to the last minute, she resisted it, got a bloody nose as a result from Parliament, and then gave in. And she seems to be doing the same again.
The disagreements, debates and disputes have been going on for 2.5 years, but this border is still the biggest barrier on the road to Brexit. Chris Page, BBC News, Belfast.
Back here at Westminster, I have Gina Miller with me, the businesswoman who won that legal case to give Parliament a vote on starting the Brexit process. Gina, good to see you. Thanks very much.
Good evening.
We'll battle against the
I
shouts.
know, it's very loud.
We've just been talking to Lord Lamont,
yes,
who at this point thinks I think it's fair to summarise, saying that he doesn't think there'll be sufficient changes coming from today's talks to allow Conservative MPs to back Mrs May's deal. What's your reading of things today?
I think there is no surprise. Everyone's stuck to their guns and they've said this is the only deal. So I think what Mrs May has done is actually those who are in the Norway camp or who think you should go back, ERG, she's actually can say now, I've tried, I've gone back, and this is the only deal on the table.
When we talk about assurances being expressed around the backstop issue for the Irish border, do you accept that assurances are not going to be enough, that there needs to be something that is legally enforceable, something that is written in, if you like, if not to the agreement itself, to some kind of addendum?
I think we have to put aside a lot of this noise and just concentrate on the fact that this withdrawal agreement will become an international treaty and we will be bound by it. It's not like Parliament not binding the hands of future Parliament, or the fact that you have a new party in power, so therefore you can overturn the manifesto. This is going to be international law. It has to be written in. If not, it doesn't have any legal weight.
Do you accept that people have a valid concern about whether Britain, the UK, could be trapped by this backstop condition? Do you think that's a valid anxiety?
Absolutely. I think if you couldn't write a worse deal, because ironically this gives away parliamentary sovereignty. This is an agreement of servitude. It is not one that anyone should sign up to. It is the worst of all deals.
Which leads you to say that people should get another say in the matter?
I think if Parliament, I have always thought the Parliament should actually resolve this. It's why I fought for Parliament, but I can't see that there is any outcome that is going to create a solution to this. And if they can't, by the 21st of January, then it has to be put back to the people. We cannot carry on with this waste. We are not looking after our country. We're wasting money doing all of this. We're wasting time. And the rest of the world is looking on at us thinking, what is going on? This country that we used to respect is now just in chaos.
Following the vote last week, Parliament is now in a position, in effect, to instruct the government. This was not the position before, but that vote last week, which was very significant, has given Parliament a different kind of role in this entire process. Are you saying that you don't think that this currently constituted House of Commons has got the means or the wherewithal to make that instruction, and that therefore people should get their own say? Is that the sense of it?
I think what the MPs firstly need to do is realise that whilst they make this phrase, they say this phrase, there is no majority in Parliament for no deal. They have to understand that legally, if there isn't an agreed outcome, the deal is probably the only legal outcome. So they have got to wake up to that reality, and they've got to try and get to a place where they can agree something with a majority. But at the moment, there is no majority for anything in that House.
It's a bit of a challenge for people who've said all along that we should be respecting the result of 2016 and respecting the fact that that was the democratic mandate given to government. You've said it yourself many times.
I've said it myself many times, yes.
But it's a big leap then for people to accept that there needs to be a second exercise of that kind when the first one hasn't delivered on the result. How do you make that argument?
Well, I can say that through my campaign End the Chaos, I've been around the country, the majority is there. People do not trust politicians. They don't trust this House. They want to have the final say. Every poll shows it, all the data coming out shows it. It's not necessarily, we can't predict the outcome. What people are saying, give us a chance to finally have a say on this.
And of course, you'll have been told many times that the reason you want it is because you think there's a good chance of getting rid of Brexit once and for all. That's what people say to you.
They will say to that, and that is not my call, it's up to people. I've always said this is about an informed choice. People have the right, and I personally believe it should be all the options, I know other people have their views, but I think we have to draw a line under this, because how on earth are we going to get out of this mess? We can't carry on like this for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. We have to have a final say, draw a line under that, and just absolutely agree to move on.
It's good of you to come here today, I have to say, join us on here. There's a lot of abuse being directed at you personally.
Yes.
Is that still going on?
You know, the death threats are now at a premium at the moment, and it's extraordinary. But for somebody to be able to stand up and have their say, everybody entitled to do that. But actually, this vote, what's going on in Parliament, is only happening because I invested my time, my safety, my money, and my belief that Parliament is sovereign.
We shall see where it takes us, Gina. Thank you very much. Nice to see you. Gina Miller there, good of her to join us today. And as I say, feelings running very high. The crowd here behind me, arguing, by the way, on both sides of this argument. Still, very strong pro-Brexit contingent here today, and indeed those who are equally vehement against the entire process. But as we arrived today, I think it's fair to say that feelings were running even more high than they were yesterday. There is a bit of an intensity in the shouting and campaigning today. So our thanks to Gina Miller for joining us there, and to Lord Lamont earlier, of course. We're now going to talk to Tony Connolly, who's Europe editor for Ireland's broadcaster RTE, who's in Brussels. Tony, very good of you to join us. Let's have your readout on today's events, and what leeway, if any, is there, you know, beyond all the sound bites, what leeway do you detect for more than the odd reassurance for Mrs May today?
Well, I think the EU has been crystal clear that they can't reopen the withdrawal agreement. So beyond that, what can they do? It's clear that there have been signals that the EU would be prepared to offer clarification, some kind of side declaration or letter of intent that would spell out that the backstop is not necessarily something that's permanent. It's not something that all sides want to see in place. It is there as an insurance policy. Now, clearly, they will have to work carefully to do that, and it's not clear from my vantage point that they will have time to do that ahead of the European Council this week. EU leaders, of course, meeting on Thursday and Friday. Donald Tusk, the European Council President, has alerted them to the fact that they will have to discuss Brexit, but so far no text has been proposed by the British side. Theresa May has obviously been sounding out Mark Rutte, the Dutch Prime Minister, and Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, before coming here to Brussels this evening. I think it's interesting that she's met the Dutch Prime Minister, because he was given a declaration 2 years ago on the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, but the difference there was that he was able to guarantee to EU leaders that he could deliver the Dutch Parliament, whereas clearly Theresa May can't do that. So I think the suspicion may be that she's somehow playing for time to lodge a request with the European Union, let that cook for a while. We've seen that there isn't going to be another vote potentially before the 21st of January. So I think that could be what her strategy is at the moment. Obviously, it's a very high-risk one.
I think one of the issues, Tony, which maybe you can shed some light on, is to what extent can Mrs May get something in these next few days, you know, including in Dublin tomorrow, which is legally enforceable, something that she can say is baked into this agreement in some kind of way that is legally enforceable. Do you think that is beyond the possibilities of these few days of talks now?
I think that's quite a remote possibility, because the legal text is closed, the withdrawal agreement is closed. A declaration could amplify or clarify what's in the withdrawal agreement and what's in the political declaration. It really depends on what she's looking for. Now, there was a clue this morning from Andrea Leadsom, the leader of the Commons, who said that perhaps the House of Commons could get some veto in due course if the backstop came into effect, and every year that the backstop was in play. But that would be way beyond what the EU could agree to, because you would have an international legally binding treaty that was then held hostage by the House of Commons from year to year. So the legal nature of this, I think, is going to be a very tricky thing for both Theresa May and for the European Union.
Tony, good to talk to you once again. Thanks for helping us out. Tony Connolly there, the Europe editor for the Irish broadcaster RTE. Why don't we step away from Brexit for just a moment and take a look at some of the day's other news. Let's join Sean.
Hugh, thank you very much. Claiming to be migrants from Iran have been rescued from a small boat off the coast of Kent. More than 100 migrants, the majority believed to be Iranian, crossed the Channel from France in November. The UK authorities are warning about the dangers of sailing small boats between Calais and Dover. It's the world's busiest shipping lane. Well, our correspondent Colin Campbell has compiled this exclusive report.
Emerging from the darkness, an inflatable dinghy. It's 2 a.m. We're in the middle of the English Channel. The dinghy is motoring at full speed from France towards the Kent coast.
Are you okay? Okay?
We get a thumbs up. However, the boat is dangerously overcrowded, taking on water. The 6 migrants, cold, scared, desperate, but determined to get to the UK.
This dinghy is in a precarious position. It's vulnerable because it's now entering a shipping lane and there are a number of ships coming towards it. So we're shepherding it almost, I think, at the moment, so it remains in a safe position.
We're on board a Dover fishing boat. This is the 3rd migrant rescue for skipper Matthew Coker in 3 months.
There was 5 ships coming down in one lump, and he cut across in front of them, and I don't know, if we hadn't been with him, then ships wouldn't have gone round it, because I'm only just picking him up, so I don't think they would have seen him. As you can see, there's no lights on the boat at all.
The migrants, who are wrapped in blankets and scarves, speak little English.
Where are you from? You're Iranian. The water at the moment appears to be going into the back of the dinghy, but they're continuing, they're not stopping, they don't want our help. It's a desperate race to try to get to the UK for these people.
Although they decline our offers of help, they do stop to ask for water, which I lower down to them in a net.
Okay.
In the last 3 months, more than 100 migrants have made this treacherous crossing.
Look, I will check the weather. You have waves in the sea.
A fortnight ago, we exposed how some of the smuggling operations are being planned from a makeshift migrant camp in Dunkirk. We secretly filmed using an undercover researcher.
A boat, it will cost you £3,000 to £4,000. I'm taking 3 people with me. They pay in cash. We get a boat and off we go.
Last night the weather and sea conditions in the Channel were good, but in a small boat, in the dark, it's still incredibly dangerous.
The message is going back to the camps or to the people on the other side, to the gangs, that it's working. So more are going to come, and I'm certain they will keep coming until there's an absolute tragedy.
These migrants were safely rescued by the RNLI and the Border Force, but it is a potentially deadly route that more and more are trying. Despite winter, despite the risks, the migrants keep coming. Colin Campbell, BBC News, Dover.
Wages grew by 3.3% in the year to October, the biggest annual increase in a decade. Ministers have welcomed the figures, but the TUC, which represents unions, said the pay growth was little consolation for workers who've experienced what it calls the longest pay squeeze in 200 years. Over the same 12 months, the number of people in work rose by 79,000 to almost 32.5 million, a record high. A paedophile has been jailed for life for murdering 2 9-year-old girls in 1986. Russell Bishop, who's 52, sexually assaulted and strangled Nicola Fellows and Karen Hadaway near Brighton. The following year, he was acquitted of what had become known as the Babes in the Wood killings. His conviction follows the discovery of new forensic evidence. Police investigating allegations of mistreatment of patients at Blackpool Victoria Hospital have arrested 2 more professionals. A man and a woman are now being questioned on suspicion of administering a poison or noxious substance. The first arrest in the case was made last month. Those are the other stories. Back now to Hugh Edwards at Westminster.
Sean, thanks very much. And yes, back at Westminster, the demonstrators are still here, the campaigners. This is the day that MPs were meant to be taking part in the big vote on the Prime Minister's Brexit plans, but as we know, that vote was delayed yesterday. Prime Minister instead spending today in European capitals, asking fellow leaders to give further assurances on the deal that she has negotiated, and those assurances are focused really on the future of the Irish border. Many Conservative MPs, by the way, wanting the deal not to be subject to assurances. They want the entire thing to be reopened and renegotiated. These are the developments so far today. Just quickly for you, Theresa May, as I say, currently in Brussels. She's met the European Council President Donald Tusk. We're expecting an update on that in the next few minutes. He said yesterday the deal couldn't be renegotiated. This morning in Berlin, Prime Minister meeting Chancellor Merkel, who has said there is no way to change this Brexit deal. This followed a meeting with the Dutch Prime Minister earlier today, and there'll be a meeting with the Taoiseach in Dublin tomorrow. On that crucial question of when MPs will get the big vote, the one that was meant to be happening today, well, Downing Street said it would take place by the 21st of January. Now, that's, there might have been a little bit of irony attached to that, because, of course, that is the last possible day for the debate to happen, because the entire thing has to be approved by then. And in the Commons today, by the way, Labour forcing an emergency debate which has been taking place on the government's handling of the debate. Jeremy Corbyn also being urged by other opposition parties, including the SNP, to engineer a vote of no confidence in the government. So those are the main points for you. And here with me on the green is Chris Wilkins, who knows this number 10 Downing Street very well, a former Director of Strategy and speechwriter for Theresa May. Chris, good to see you. Thanks very much.
Good to see you.
What will the Prime Minister be trying to do in these talks today?
Well, I think try and get any language out of our European partners that will help her over the line. I think the ideal is some sort of legally binding document. There's been talk of this sort of codicil idea, which would be a sort of an appendix, essentially, to the agreement that's already been signed off.
Is that doable?
And that's the kind of thing she's looking for. Personally, I think it's probably, that's a stretch too far. But I think that's really the only thing that's really going to convince some of the Conservative MPs in particular on the Green benches there to change their mind and vote for this.
Because polite words, even if they're quite robust in terms of assurances, are not going to do the trick, are they?
I think that's right, given where we are. I think there might have been a time when that would have worked out. You can foresee sort of a circumstance, if you wind back a few months, you would have imagined getting to this point with this kind of deal, maybe Parliament voting it down, then some sort of slightly warmer words, and then it going through the second time round after MPs had had a say. The difficulty now, I think, is that actually MPs really have lost, I think, some faith and trust in the centre, effectively. And that's because of the way the negotiations have been, I think, conducted. I think Number 10's failure to reach out more obviously to some of the sort of moderate Conservative MPs and even some of the moderate Labour MPs has really, I think, destroyed a little bit of the trust that was there, and some of the way. Well, I think it's part of the way the system has gone. I think there's definitely been a sense in which Number 10, really since the election last year, have been living day to day, trying to get through every day, and without sort of necessarily a big strategy thinking ahead, actually recognising that rather than maybe playing up to the whims of people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and people on the right of the Tory party, actually the majority for the deal that they were always likely to bring back from Europe was really more in the centre ground of Parliament with those moderate Conservative and Labour MPs.
Prime Minister's been badly advised of what you're saying.
I think it would have been better after the election last year to have recognised the way this was going and to put in place a strategy to reach out to those kind of groups.
But even if she was badly advised, what does that say about her own political instincts? She's a very experienced politician. Would she not have instinctively thought that was the right course?
Well, I think it's an incredibly difficult situation. I remember after the election in particular, it was a time when it was all quite a confused picture and not a situation anyone wanted to be in. And you know, you are at that point sort of thinking, how do I get through this day, this week, and not necessarily looking far ahead. And of course she's been focused on getting a deal and bringing it back, and you know, the deal I think she brought back actually was probably as good a deal as one could have expected in the circumstances. So I think that was very effective. It's the political handling that was the problem.
Okay, it's an important point you make about the nature of the deal. If you go back to Lancaster House and that important speech that the Prime Minister made, there are plenty of people who've stood on this platform will say that she's in the spot of bother she's in today because she boxed herself in that speech, because she laid down these red lines and because she laid down conditions precisely to please some people in the Conservative Party, thereby laying the trap that she would later walk into as these people see it. What do you say?
Well, I know people say that. I just have a different sort of interpretation of what went on there. I think, you know, Lancaster House was the starting point of a 2-year negotiation process, and it wasn't the end point. It was always the sort of opening gambit, if you like. It was and in any negotiation you start with the sort of maximum thing that you want, and then you recognise that as you go through the negotiation you're going to compromise and you're going to find a middle ground. ground. You know, if you want to buy my house, you're going to offer me one price, I'm going to offer you another, and then we're going to negotiate and find a middle ground. So I find it odd that people sort of look back at that time and say that what Lancaster House was sort of the final deal. Well, it never was. It was a starting point, and it's got us where we are now.
OK, good. Just a final one, if I may. Do you think this will come back in some form in the new year? Is that the kind of timing you'd be looking at? And if it is not to do with legally enforceable additions of some kind, do you think this deal then will fail?
I think it's now very difficult to see how the deal will go through, precisely because, as I say, I think that loss of trust is there, and I think it's difficult. I think the Prime Minister will bring it back. I think she will get some movement from our European partners, and I imagine the vote will take place in January, say before the 21st. But I think then if it doesn't go through, at that point, I think the Prime Minister really has to think about what some people here are demanding, which is that second referendum, and give it back to people to let them have their say.
It's very good to talk to you, Chris. Thanks very much, and for your insight as well. Chris Wilkins there for us, who's the former Director of Strategy in Downing Street. Now, the Prime Minister has been in Brussels, having those talks today with Donald Tusk and others. She's been in other capitals too. She's just been speaking, and I understand the Prime Minister is at the Ambassador's residence, I think, in Brussels. This is what she had to say.
Prime Minister, reports tonight that the ERG says there are enough letters to trigger a no-confidence vote on your leadership. Have you been told? And if so, what are you going to do about it?
No, what I've been doing here in Europe over the past day is actually doing what I promised Parliament that I would do, which is to speak to other leaders in Europe about the concerns Parliament have raised about the backstop. And I had breakfast with Prime Minister Rutte, saw Chancellor Merkel over lunch. I'm seeing Presidents Tusk and Juncker this evening. And what has been shown to me from those meetings is that there is a shared determination to deal with this issue and address this problem. And I'm going to be seeing the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar tomorrow, and then on Thursday returning to the EU Council. The deal we've negotiated is a deal that honours the referendum, it honours the result of the referendum, and it's the best deal available. Indeed, it's the only deal available. And the backstop, which is the issue that Parliament has raised, the backstop is a necessary guarantee for the people of Northern Ireland. And whatever outcome you want, whatever relationship you want with Europe in the future, there's no deal available that doesn't have a backstop within it. But we don't want the backstop to be used, and if it is, we want to be certain that it is only temporary. And it's those assurances that I will be seeking from fellow leaders over the coming days.
So that was a no, you haven't been told about these 48 plus letters, or you have been told?
No, I have been here in Europe dealing with the issue which I promised Parliament I would be dealing with, which is the backstop in Northern Ireland and the backstop for Northern Ireland, which is in the withdrawal agreement, talking to fellow leaders about the concerns that Parliament have raised. I have seen a shared determination to deal with this issue. The backstop is a guarantee to the people of Northern Ireland, but we want to know that it can only be temporary if it is brought into use, and it is those assurances that I will be seeking over the coming days.
But from those same leaders and officials you've been meeting here in Brussels, we've had this emphatic commitment that nothing will be renegotiated. Given that, and the fact you haven't been able to put the withdrawal agreement to the vote in the Commons, tomorrow's Cabinet meeting, will you be stepping up the no-deal preparation?